Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest NITECAP speaker series. I'm Ben Van Houten, president of the board of the Nighttime Economy, Culture, and Policy Alliance, also known as NITECAP. The NITECAP Alliance is a network of professionals responsible for nighttime economy advocacy, planning, and management in U.S. cities to share experiences, policies, and practices, raise awareness about nighttime economy and culture across disciplines, and highlight the value and importance of this role for government. Through our blog, speaker series, policy papers, and other initiatives, we share new ideas and practical solutions for managing the nighttime economy, drawn from a network of experts in this field. And we do that work thanks in part to the support of our members. You can become a member at NITECAP at night-cap.org. Memberships are very affordable and support our ongoing work in this field and help connect you to this exciting and growing movement. The speaker series is our ongoing series of free webinars on emerging topics related to nighttime economy management. Through this series, which is archived on our YouTube page, we hear from practitioners working on strategies to enhance life at night in cities around the United States. And I'm really excited about today's session. Today's session is titled Moving People at Night, Transportation Innovations for the Nighttime Economy. And the prompt that we're all going to hear from our speakers reacting to is: workers, residents, and visitors need safe, reliable, and convenient ways to move around cities, but travel options that exist during the day often disappear at night. And the nighttime economy often presents unique transportation and parking challenges for musicians, late night workers, and large event attendees. What are policymakers and advocates doing to address these complex problems? That's a lot to cover in under an hour. So I'm really excited to hear from our four panelists today. We have Allison Harnden, the Nighttime Economy Manager for the City of Pittsburgh, Scott Plusquellec, the Nightlife Business Advocate for the City of Seattle, Rob Henig-Bell, the Community Projects Manager for the Mayor's Office of Nighttime Economy from the City of New Orleans, and Benton McDonough, the Director of the Mayor's Office of Nightlife in the City of Nashville. Thank you all so much for being part of this conversation. To kick things off, I'd love to hear a little bit from each of you to help ground today's conversation, against the backdrop of the experience that you have in your different offices around the country. At a high level, why does transportation matter to the nighttime economy? And how would you characterize transportation at night in your city? And how have you seen transportation challenges impact life at night in your city? That's a lot, but I'm hoping to get some reactions from each of you in turn. Maybe Allison, what's your reaction to why does this work matter, and how do you see it play out in your universe?
Well, without transportation, we can't have workers in our establishments. We can't have patrons. In the terms of Pittsburgh, it's a city of 90 neighborhoods, and our nighttime economy is not necessarily the most robust in our downtown. So we have a lot of workers that live in the more affordable areas, which are outside of the core. And so to me, it's important because we can't even have a robust nighttime economy if we don't have workers. And so we really need to have something that works. And honestly, it's not working right now. And it looks to be maybe continue to be very challenged, especially with budget.
Thank you. Scott, what's your reaction? Why is this important, and how have you seen it play out and impact Seattle?
I think transportation issues are probably the most important with regards to the nighttime economy. Definitely in the top 5, but I think probably the most, because you have to facilitate transportation of goods and services, make sure that our venues are getting their materials in a timely manner. Picking up on what Allison said, workers need to be able to get in Seattle. A lot of our workers live out of town, live out in the suburbs. They've been priced out so that they are not living in town. And without a robust transportation system for them to come in, we're basically asking them to drive, which makes them have to pay for parking, which is eating into their wages, which is eating, the cost of buying gas and maintaining your car, and what if your car falls apart, and so it's a severe impact for our workers. We know it's a draw to get residents and tourists to come downtown. We have a light rail system that touches on, if doesn't go directly through, all of our major nighttime areas. And anecdotally, I hear all the time that people would go out more often and come downtown more often if that system ran later, so that they could come into town without having to worry about parking, without having to pay for parking, and just having to, being able to go out and not worry about drinking and then having to get back in their car and drive home. So there's just a ton of issues that I think really make it an essential component to the nighttime economy. And this is beyond just the hospitality workers. We're talking about anybody who's working at night, people who are cleaning office buildings. We have longshoremen here who work early hours, delivery drivers, all that. They all are very dependent on being able to get to work and not have to spend, a large portion of their paycheck on transportation. So I think it's top of mind. We unfortunately, I would say that our late night transportation here needs improvement.
And we'll dig into that more during this session. Thank you, Scott. Rob, I'm throwing the same questions to you. Why is transportation important in its intersection with the nighttime economy? How have you seen that play out in New Orleans?
Well, I would largely second what's already been said about workers needing to get in and being pushed out further out, away from the downtown, which is where most of our nightlife occurs. But then again, I think about how New Orleans, the history of New Orleans, and why people come to New Orleans, which is the biggest driver of our economy, tourism coming in, and people do really come down here for the culture, the people, not for the the glitz of other places or the biggest acts, although we do get a lot of big acts and really large events. But what draws people here is the culture. And so if in all of our neighborhoods all around town, there's lots of dive bars and things that have still a lot of live music traditionally. But those, for folks to get to and from those places and to be able to park like in neighborhoods, that's a problem. That's not really working out for both the patrons and a lot of the workers. So, it is, as everyone understands, a multifaceted issue. Parking is so much of what I and everyone I know at the city, what we all deal with in one way or another, is a challenge, environmentally, just the geometry of our streets and roadways, enforcement, all of that. But then trying to find parking solutions that integrate with other solutions. So it has to be kind of all of that together. And I know we're going to get into it more, but that's how we're seeing it, is like trying to meet the immediate needs of better, more affordable parkings, particularly for hospitality workers. But then trying to couple that with integrating in other solutions that will allow the nightlife businesses, workers, and then ultimately other residents and tourists to get from a hotel into the neighborhoods in all sorts of ways that are convenient, helpful, and safety has to be a top of mind concern when it comes to getting around town. And for us in New Orleans, obviously we don't have a great reputation for crime, and that is really felt from top to bottom here. This is not just something that outsiders feel. I've seen it firsthand from folks in high places, folks who work out on the street, that, you know, they feel a lot of concern. So it has to be coupled with that focus as well.
Thank you, Rob. Benton, in Nashville, is what's being discussed here, does that resonate with you? How are you seeing transportation challenges manifest there?
Oh, totally. You know, I think the common theme that we're hearing through you know, all of these representatives, and that is applicable to Nashville as well, relates to the, you know, transportation issues and the, you know, the fact that people are priced out of the housing market. And so, you know, I remember one of the first places that I visited when I took this position. You know, I spoke with one of the bar owners, and they talked about, you know, how many times they have to wear multiple hats within their venue, because they might have one night, you know, two guys that work in the kitchen that are sharing a place about, you know, 30 minutes outside of town, and they have one reliable car, and they had car issues and couldn't get in. So, you know, he's trying to run the establishment, but also having to do all of these, you know, these jobs that make the business work. And so, you know, I think that's always resonated with me in dealing with these issues. And then, you know, I know before Mayor O'Connell took over, and you know, he's a huge proponent of public transportation. And one of the things they did when he first came into office was to upgrade our system so that all of the buses aren't going through the way they had it before. All the buses had to come into the city, and then you had to get on another bus to go to a different part of town. And so he made it so that you could take a more direct route from your, you know, place of origin in a different part of the city, so you didn't have to come through the traffic and that sort of thing. So something, you know, as simple as that, I think has really made a huge difference in the city. But we also have the transit referendum that passed last November, and that's going to, you know, make a huge impact on the city and transportation as well. But you know, I think on top of dealing with that, you know, like everyone else is talking about the price of parking and that sort of thing, you know, that's another issue you have to deal with, because, you know, then the workers have to, you know, they wind up paying a huge part of their you know, of their salary, or, you know, their hourly wage on parking once they get down to the city. And so, you know, we've had to really focus on helping the you know, provide this balance between taking care of our visitors to the city, but also taking care of the people who actually make the city work and operate. So so that's actually one of the more interesting parts of trying to provide support to Nightlife, is making sure that we're helping both sectors, I think. So
Thank you, Benton. You know, it never ceases to amaze me that across different cities, different jurisdictions, different geographies, different sizes, that that, you know, these common themes, these common challenges, and I really appreciate the way that all of you have touched on that nighttime transportation is in part a story of where the nighttime workforce is able to afford to live, and those patterns changing, and the importance of nighttime transportation and moving people around in ways that help celebrate culture and community, and then thinking about intersections with safety and you know, I'm really excited to dig into this topic and hear from all of you about what you're working on. Turning to that, all of you are engaging in transportation strategies in different ways. And so I'd like to hear from each of you more about the different innovations happening in your city, what problems you're trying to tackle, and how you're seeing that play out. So maybe Allison, starting with you. Pittsburgh has pursued some innovative strategies to both reduce congestion and also generate revenue from nighttime parking. And I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about I believe it's the Parking Enhancement District. So what's the background of challenges it was trying to solve, and how is it playing out?
Yeah, so this is, I started in this role in the end of 2015, and it was really the first project that I was handed to implement. And it was kind of multi-pronged. It was sort of like solving a safety problem with transportation, by coming up with a different model of how we move people around and how they park. So the parking enhancement district so this is on the south side, across the river from downtown. This is our latest nightlife district, I would say. At the time, it definitely was. And the streets are very narrow there, so night congestion can get pretty bad. But at the same time, there were big safety concerns that people would go and park back in the neighborhoods because they didn't want to, pay for parking in the early evening, and it got too crowded on the street, the main street, Carson Street, to be able to park. So they would park back in the neighborhoods, and the cars were being vandalized, people were being assaulted. So it did nothing to uphold the positive reputation that they were trying to put out there. So the parking enhancement district, at the time, parking revenue and meters was only collected until 6 p.m. And so we looked at extending those hours to midnight on Friday and Saturday when the customers were most dense. This is also another issue that we were trying to solve, that because it's a destination area, the amount of city services that a neighborhood normally would get were not enough. And they don't have a business improvement district. They tried a business improvement district, it didn't pass. So this, in essence, this is business improvement district paid for through parking. So at $1.50 an hour, it started Friday and Saturday from 6 to midnight. Over the years, we have extended it and increased the fees, looking at parking demand and seeing what the market could bear. But the mayor at the time had concern about our night workers and didn't want them to have to pay for parking and incur that extra expense. So closer to downtown across the river is a very large parking lot that's used mostly for daytime. So the parking authority agreed to give that parking lot free parking at night. And we got funding from actually a hospital and another nonprofit to fund a shuttle that we called the Night Rider. And that ran for 3 years. And so you park on the south or on the downtown side, it would shuttle you across the river and shuttle through 4 stops. It was originally meant to be for the workers. It ended up being more popular with people that were going out at nighttime, and actually became most popular with older people that weren't comfortable, or suburbanites that were not comfortable parallel parking on those really narrow streets. So there were some interesting outcomes to that. But so now this was 2017 that it actually, April of 2017, so we're in an anniversary month. And to date has brought in we're getting up to, it'll reach 2 million in a few months. We're after pandemic, we're back to even better levels. And now we've extended it to Thursday night, Sunday night, and the hours go till 3 a.m. And part of that was because post-pandemic, we were seeing activity happening in parking lots after 2 a.m. And we thought if they're having to pay for parking, maybe it would help disperse that. It would also bring in extra revenue. So do you want to talk about anything we spent the money on?
Sure, I do quickly, but just to reflect on it, I mean, strategies around congestion management and concerns about parking in the neighborhoods were balanced with identifying opportunities for assets that were used in the daytime but weren't being used at night,
Right.
and coming up with some new shuttle services that didn't involve private cars driving into the district, but that actually proved to be popular among workers and patrons alike. It's really cool, very, very interesting stuff.
Yes, I have to say the Night Rider is no longer running. And I think, part of that is because it ran up against COVID. And, I think, Uber was still pretty nascent in 2017. So, it was, it's definitely got more drivers and more legs now. But some of that money was spent on police cameras to add to that street. But the majority of it is spent on a clean team, which now also helps with, creating that more positive reputation for the community. And it's a big expense, and something that a business improvement district usually provides. So that everybody's happy with it, that part of it. After St. Patrick's Day or any big event, it's like it's never happened. And then the neighbors always comment on it, the residents, the businesses, they all love it.
Excellent. More broadly, I know you've started working on bringing a nighttime economy lens to transportation planning happening in Pittsburgh, and I'm curious, could you talk a little bit more about that work, why it's so important, any sort of early things you're learning about plugging nighttime economy into that kind of transportation planning?
Yeah, I just had a meeting this morning with our comprehensive plan consultants. We just launched that, I think, last month or the month before, and it's a 2-year venture. And I'm just so pleased. There are 20 interest areas, and they've included us in about 4. And one of those is mobility, and they talked to us today. I think a lot of the work we do, we have to invite ourselves to the party. Part of our job is to show people that there is a need for a night lens in their work. And so that's something that I have always, had no difficulty doing. Persistence and inviting myself to the party. But I think we're, looking at some of the things that came up is how it is so connected to transportation is so connected to many things, affordable housing, which we've already talked about, the need for that transit-oriented development where people can actually, get to these jobs. But what really came up as we saw this first phase where people were connecting or collecting current conditions, all these other industry segments had all this data, and the thing that is really missing for us, not just in mobility, but in nighttime economy in general, is enough data. And, you can't prove something that's not there. You can scream at the wind, but it's just not there. So it's great that they're hearing this and, looking for ways to hopefully help us get data on, we don't know where workers live. We don't know where our night workers live and how they're, there's only 2 people in my office, me and another person. And so I just think, then we're working with our regional transit authority to bring that night lens also to the bus line redesign that they're doing. We also have a Southwest Pennsylvania Commission commute info group that meets quarterly. That was the first thing I plugged into and just was showing up saying, night people are commuters too. This needs to be part of the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. Scott, to pick up on that thread of transportation planning, I'm curious about the thinking that you're doing, the work that you're doing, thinking about nighttime transportation within a transportation planning conversation.
Sure. So right after the pandemic, our mayor came out with a downtown activation plan that was designed to really reinvigorate downtown, which is our major economic driver, the downtown core. And with the hopes that, doing that, you're reviving downtown, you're going to eventually be reviving outer neighborhoods. And so we were able to, in my office, decided that they really wanted to get behind a life at night strategy as part of that downtown activation plan and really look at what are the needs in downtown. I don't know if the rest of you have seen, there was a University of Toronto study that came out, I think a year or 2 ago, that was showing that nighttime economies were recovering faster than daytime economies in cities. And so using that to leverage, like, let's put more resources behind a life at night strategy. We're doing that. And one of the 5 buckets that is part of that is really looking at late night transportation and the needs for all of our workers, residents, and visitors and businesses. So what I'm mainly looking at right now is, like I said, we have this light rail system that touches on or goes through the majority of our nighttime districts. And we have a problem in that it runs until about 1 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays on the weekends, but our bars get out at 2. And so what we see is creating a lot of public safety issues in that our bars empty into the streets at 2 a.m. And we do not have a lot of offerings for people to disperse, to get away, to find food, because a lot of our restaurants don't stay open that late. But you have these large crowds that are concentrating in these areas, and that leads to all kinds of issues, as I'm sure everyone knows. So one of the data points that we discovered in after the pandemic was that due to work from home, we actually have a lower ridership on the light rail system on Mondays and Fridays than we do on the weekends. The weekends are actually having more robust ridership. So what we would like to do, what I would like to do, and what I'm hoping to do, and starting to have these conversations, is, one of the reasons why Sound Transit, who operates the light rail system, shuts down is because they want to do repair work on the trains and on the tracks. And they generally have said, we would like to get that done at night so that we can be ready for the morning commute. Well, if our Mondays and Friday morning commutes or evening commutes are less, then perhaps we could shift some of those times so that we could run our trains later on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings to accommodate getting these crowds out. In addition, our workers, if the place is closing at 2, our workers aren't getting out until 3 or 4. They need a way to get home as well. And we've already talked about the parking issues with that. And I also meant to mention that another sort of pain point here is that Seattle has put a number of regulations on our TNCs, our Ubers and Lyfts, which have driven the cost of taking an Uber and Lyft up quite a bit. I'm always sort of shocked when I go to another city and take a Lyft, because I'm like, wait, what do you mean it's that cheap? Because it's really amazingly expensive to do that. So that's less of an option here for people who are trying to get home, or for workers who are trying to get home. So trying to leverage some of that data to get the light rail to run a bit later on those weekend nights, pilot that program, and see how it works moving forward. And then we also have the other part of it. We have a transit levy that is going to be renewed next year. And so I'm working with our transportation department and our metro. We have 3 transportation departments here: a city, a county, and the Sound Transit. So and they all operate intermingled. So it's kind of a knot, but we have a night owl bus system that it just doesn't, it runs infrequently and doesn't have, there's lots of issues with first and last mile. So trying to add money into that transit levy next year to get more robust night metro system.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. One of the impetuses for this session was actually some work that you and folks in Seattle recently did around venues needing curb access and some really innovative work. And I'm curious if you could share a little bit about that program, which I think is maybe it's the first of its kind, or at least the first in a long time to really tackle on this persistent challenge around venues and curbs.
Yeah, super excited about it. I think this is probably the biggest thing that the city has done for our nightlife venues and our musicians, you know, in decades. So back in 2010, the Seattle Music Commission worked with the Seattle Department of Transportation and the city to develop this pilot program called the Musician Priority Load Zones, and it was an unenforceable sort of suggestion parking area in front of venues that allowed musicians to be able to unload in front of it. But like I said, it wasn't enforceable, so that people could park there without, you know, fear of being towed or ticketed. But it was also generally attached to a load zone, and so musicians couldn't stay there. And oftentimes, if it was in an unmarked van or car, they would get ticketed. So the musicians were losing money because, like, they would play and they would come out and there would be a ticket on their car, and which would wipe out, you know, probably the majority of what they made that night. So that's been in place for a number of years. And one of the things the Music Commission had recently done was a study of musicians to see the biggest needs. And one of the biggest needs that came out was this parking thing. Like, it's impossible to get to a show, to find parking. You might have to park blocks and blocks away, carry your heavy equipment up, and then the reverse at night, late at night. So we worked with the Department of Transportation, modeling after the law the regulations that allowed them to do street cafes. So we modeled it off of that in the taking of the right of way. And now venues can sign up for, they used to have to do barriers, and they used to have to apply every single time that they had a show to get this. Now we have an enforceable sign, stripped area in front of the venue that is musician load and parking. Venues fill out a form. They get a PDF of a permit that they fill out. They can give to the musicians who put it in their van, and so they can unload in front of the venue. They can park there. They don't have to worry about moving again. And if somebody else parks there, they can be towed. They can be ticketed. But our parking enforcement also knows about this. Like, it's a legit legal sign. It's in Seattle ordinance now. So so they are now enforcing it for us. So we just launched it last month. Venues, we have over 32 venues that have signed up to do it. And SDOT is working diligently to go through and work with them to measure out where the spaces are. And I would go into way more detail, but we don't have time.
Well, it's an amazing achievement, Scott, and it's definitely a model for other jurisdictions. So well done.
Yeah.
Rob, I know you've been thinking about transportation for nighttime workers, and I'm wondering, can you give us a little bit of context about the needs of nighttime workers in the French Quarter and the strategies you're currently pursuing?
Yeah. Well, you know, I've been in the office for about 18 months now. And when I arrived, there was already an effort underway with our office and our local transit agency, the RTA, to survey nighttime transit ridership, particularly downtown. And, you know, that gave, you know, pretty straightforward results that folks, you know, were assumed were the case, namely that, you know, nighttime service was inadequate. A lot of folks still, even folks who sometimes rode the bus, you know, if they are sharing a car, like, they'll drive when they can, or they'll get dropped off. There's a lot of safety concerns, but there's just it's a mess. There's not a lot of affordable, accessible parking, particularly within the interior of the French Quarter. So a lot of people walk great distances into their hospitality job in the French Quarter through some, you know, fairly unsafe areas. So there's lots of stories of either folks themselves, but the vast majority of hospitality workers know someone at their job who's, you know, had, you know, been mugged, for lack of a better word. And so this is you know, everyone's on high alert around that. So this is the reality as it's been for a little while. And so we have been, trying to push the RTA to, improve service. They know that they should be doing more at night, that, hourly bus service is inadequate. They've just recently performed a whole bus network redesign built around high frequency routes and a sort of hub system all around New Orleans. And, I think that's going fairly well, but their ability to actually deliver on greater service at night is not within reach as of this time. So while we're continuing to push them to do more and think innovatively, and they are, they're trying to do more micro transit and more connections to micro mobility, bike share and other services. We have taken on trying to do what we can on the parking front, and I think this applies to cities all around probably the world. But post COVID, there being more office space downtowns, more parking spaces available downtown. So it was good timing. We have a really effective partnership coming into place. We have not yet launched our program, which is called Serving Hospitality Downtown Parking. But we are weeks away from getting it out the door, knocking on wood here. But the parking companies were eager. They have a lot of excess capacity, and they know that they rely on the hospitality industry, and they have lots of relationships. And I think things, are just fairly aligned to make that such a partnership enticing and effective. So we are trying to roll out a sort of phase one of that approach by just simply being able to provide 1,000 plus, hopefully maybe a couple thousand plus discounted parking spaces, monthly discounted rates, but also discounted day rates as well. Thinking about our part-time workers of multiple jobs around the downtown area. It was a focus of this initial rollout. But we're looking into the future to hopefully try to bring back in our transit partners to have a sort of downtown people mover shuttle that a lot of certainly a lot of other cities have, but we currently lack. New Orleans previously had a downtown shuttle and very beloved here in the city. It was like small buses that looked like streetcars. They had the sort of paint job of a streetcar on the side. They were known as the Vieux Carré, which is the other name for the French Quarter. So when we talk to people about bringing that back, it really, people have a lot of interest and fond memories and know how they would use that service. So we're trying to push for that phase two to connect the RTA's downtown hub with some of these parking lots that circle the French Quarter in our central business district, and our ferry service from across the river to our New Orleans West Bank, with the idea that a lot of people, we know that we need to be doing what we can to reduce car traffic, but we have to work with what we have here. And so many of our hospitality workers are coming in from 20, 30, 40 minutes away. They are driving. And so we're going to provide that relief, but hopefully, as I indicated here, try to encourage more folks to take the bus or the ferry in the downtown area and then use that shuttle to get to their final destination.
That's great, Rob. Thanks. And I appreciate the idea of thinking in a phased approach, given where the resources are, where the opportunities are. And, it sounds like an acknowledgement too, that there is not a there's not one thing that is going to solve this situation. So thinking about it from all of the different ways that people move around and all the different experiences that they have, that's really great. I'm going to come back to you on some forward thinking stuff in a minute, but I do want to get Benton in this conversation because I know that Nashville has been thinking about musician parking and musician transportation, how musicians move around. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges musicians have been navigating in Nashville and what the strategies are that are being implemented?
Sure. And I appreciate you hosting this, Ben. And one of the things I like about this is that I get to learn so much about what other cities are doing. So always listening and thinking about new ideas here for the city. But as far as what Nashville has been doing for the musicians, I can remember the musician discount parking was one of the first major initiatives that we had here in the city. And what I love about this job is that anyone can come in with this idea and you have to figure out, okay, how do we make this work? Who are the parties that we need to bring into this? And I learned so much about this job that helped me moving forward because there's so many moving parts that you have to think about, so many different groups, that sort of thing, the political realities of what it is that you're doing and really learning how to be patient and watching all of this go through. So one of the musicians came to me and said, parking has been, it's so expensive now. You might make $80 or something like that for the evening, and you wind up paying, $50 or $60 or something like that in some cases. And so, it was our job to try and figure out how do we put more money in their pocket, real money that will go back into the economy and help the city as a whole. And so it's really at that point, okay, how do we handle this issue with the discounted parking, that sort of thing. And so we approached the company, which was Metropolis, which handles most of the parking around the city. And first of all, with being the Office of Nightlife, people are kind of intrigued by that. So they want to talk to you to see what sort of interaction and what sort of partnership you can grow together. And so you get your foot in the door, and then it's a matter of selling this. Why is this going to be good for the company? And, why is this good for the city? And why is this good for the musicians? And so that's where the patience comes in, because the initial meeting is, well, we're not really sure how we're going to make this work, and so it's like, okay, that's fine. We'll come back. And so we came back a few months later, again, this is what we need to do. Can you guys help us? And so we finally came up with this plan where they would have about 8 different parking lots located throughout the entertainment district. And the groups that were involved would get 60% off, a 60% off discount on parking, which is a significant cut in the amount that they're having to pay. And so we had one group, and then also worked with the musicians union to make sure that they were included in that as well, because they'd had a parking plan in place prior to that, but they'd only had two garages at that point. So we worked with them and really got a streamlined approach in place to really be able to address the issue. And then that was working so well that then the Music Venue Alliance of Nashville, MVAN, they're the entity that represents locally owned, independently owned music venues, came to me and said, "Hey, do you think this is something that we could extend to our members and extend it outside of the entertainment district?" And I wasn't sure they had an appetite for that. And the initial meeting went about as well as the initial meeting that we had with them on the initial or the first initiative that we had in place for the musicians. And so again, that's where patience came in, and we were able to expand it and really double the number of parking garages and parking lots throughout the city, and found them, you know, very close in proximity to these establishments that were members of MVAN. And so, you know, we've just had a really good response from it. And I think the musicians that have taken part in it have been very pleased. And, you know, my hope is that they understand that, you know, the Nightlife office is here to be a liaison for them in the city, and also with businesses, and to help all of these different groups that make, you know, make nightlife and make Music City what it is. So
That's excellent, Benton. And I love hearing about the, you know, network of public and private stakeholders coming to the table to build the program and then expand the program. That feels like a really important set of resources and voices to bring together for success. We have not very much time left, which is clearly a sign that there is so much to talk about in this space. And but I want to get the group talking about some more forward-looking activity. And if folks do have questions they would like to put in the chat, please do feel free. But I've got a whole bunch here, and I guess maybe starting with Rob and Benton, if you have any reactions, and then we can throw it to the whole group. I'm curious, are there ideas you're seeing in other cities, either as part of the conversation today or just other things that are on your radar in the transportation space that you'd like to be pursuing, or that you're not sure about pursuing? I'd just be curious to get some reactions around where the sort of further opportunities are. Rob, I know you mentioned a couple phases of work that you're working on now, but what else is out there that you're interested in learning more about?
Well, I'm a little interested in you know, replicating Allison's, you know, program with the, you know, the parking revenue going into cleaning up, you know, areas of town. We certainly could use that, and I think it's kind of been a missing focus down here. You know, I'm pulling together my research from different cities in a lot of different ways. But on the transportation front, you know, it really more comes from my local experience here. And I mentioned this when we were all talking before, that, you know, our city is such a historically walkable city. You know, in the actual city grid, and the way it's laid out, it's flat, so it's a great biking city in theory, if our streets could hold together. So I think that just contains great potential for folks, you know, this generation, the next generation, be able to sort of reboot different versions of nightlife that does exist in the neighborhoods and still connected to downtown in a nice, sustainable way. I will say, I guess, to directly answer your question, it's less from their plans and their policies, because I don't read French, but from my previous visit to Montreal, I noticed that was something that they do very well. So it's something we're looking to emulate.
Excellent. Ben, anything either that you've heard today or that you've heard about previously from other cities that feels like something in this universe you'd like to explore further?
honestly, I think it comes down to a public safety issue, and you know, listening to Allison talk about the shuttle that they provided. You know, I think we're looking at more opportunities and more ideas on how to bring residents downtown, and I think that's going to be one of our critical initiatives moving forward. And that, I mean, I think that's always been something that we've aimed for. But I think providing a safe and affordable way to get back to your vehicle is something that I think is critical to the success of the city and our nightlife, and just allowing people to you know, come to the city and have a good time, and, you know, not have to worry so much about, you know, the safety side of it and the monetary side of finding parking, that sort of thing. So that might be something that we explore further.
Excellent. Allison or Scott, unless you have any specific reactions you'd like to throw out, I have another question for the whole group. Allison, you want to
Just real quick, I have loved what everybody's doing in the musician and loading and parking, and we've done some preliminary work on that. Had one conversation with our mobility department, and one thing I love about musician parking is that it is also a marketing tool. It's saying here lies a music venue, and for music cities, maybe that's no big deal, but here we need to highlight those. And so I really take my hat off to you for all the work and the steps that you've taken and that I'm going to duplicate. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, question for the whole group. As we approach the top of the hour, you all have achieved policy wins or in the process of working on policy wins. For folks who are listening, who want to be doing transportation work that has a focus on nighttime economy, any advice or any strategies? I think, understandably, the world of transportation, it can be really complicated. It's a big topic that the nighttime economy intersection is a piece of. It's connected to all of these other issues and challenges in cities. Any advice for nightlife advocates or government professionals interested in exploring transportation projects through a nighttime economy lens?
Well, I would just say sometimes transportation can sound boring, but there are so many ways to approach it, and to maybe think about the different conversations that you could have that lead into it is, and I do this all the time too. You start talking to other people and plant those seeds, and they start talking about that. So it's, like I said, this transportation could be about marketing. It can be about economic development, workforce development. One thing that we're doing is about looking at it in terms of social connection, and looking at the Surgeon General's report on loneliness and isolation. And we're doing surveying people on where, what is preventing you from social connection. So even talking about it from a mental health standpoint, and that it is a connector, is a really, I think you just have to have lots of conversations with a lot of different types of people.
Excellent. What do other folks? Yeah, Scott, you have a thought?
Oh, just be prepared for it to take a long time. Like I said, we started the musician parking and loading zone in 2010, and it just passed. So, but it's always good. One of the reasons why it suddenly took off was because we got the city council president bought into it and made it a priority. So finding those champions in elected office who can help you. I'm super stoked because our former King County executive who's a huge musician. He's a musician himself, but he's a huge music fan. Just became the chief executive of Sound Transit. So hoping that we can use him to help us with the late night transit hours, because that'll go a long way.
Awesome. Okay, Rob, and then Benton, and then I'll bring us home.
Yeah, I mean, all that sounds correct to me, especially it taking a long time. But I would just say that everyone is interested in it, even if it, yes, it can be mundane in a sense, or is mundane in a lot of ways, but it affects everybody. Everyone has opinions about it, and so you can get allies on board that you wouldn't even think would be allies, but they're also aware that it's a problem that, so you can find the alignment on it. And so it's very political, but, you can weave it together how you would want to weave it together if you are patient.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. What do you think, Benton? Advice for folks wanting to do transportation work?
I think it's important to put aside your preconceived ideas on what what's needed and what's necessary, and instead listen to the people that utilize it on a regular basis. And I think it's also not being afraid to think outside the box. And you know, you shouldn't be afraid to have an idea that other people don't, aren't talking about or haven't thought about, that sort of thing. And that you shouldn't be afraid to have an original idea on something, because chances are it's not original and other people have thought about it, but they just think that maybe it's so far outside the box that, that it's not something that can be carried out. But I think that's really important. And I think that's something that our mayor has done really well, is to have us think outside the box and think big picture all the time on things. So
excellent. Well, that is the nighttime economy work. It has to be creative work. You have to listen to the stakeholders who are impacted, who may not otherwise have a voice or a platform to share their experiences. And this has been a great conversation. I continue to learn so much. I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you all so much for your participation today, and for all of the work that you are doing on a daily basis on this and other issues to support the nighttime economy. This session will be posted on our YouTube channel. Again, for more information about NITECAP, head to nite-cap, NITE-cap.org for all of our resources. And really appreciate everybody's time today. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks, guys.